The Chicago White Sox can make all the front office changes they want, but this team is not going anywhere until they get a superstar player in the batting order. Let's discuss why on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the Fansided Network. Also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show at wherever you get your podcasts. Well, the White Sox front office changes won't mean a thing until the team can either draft or develop a superstar hitter or acquire one. Let's discuss this in the first segment, along with whether they have any budding superstars in their system and whether they have to trade their best pitcher to get one. Then 63 players played for the White Sox. Let's discuss the most random ones today as I attempt to do a player review of all 63 during the next 2 months. And finally, you and I know the 2024 season was ugly, but some terrible stats make it seem even worse that I wanted to discuss in the final segment. This episode is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.yeah. The right stay can make you a fan of any city, even your baseball rivals. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. Get the Booking.com app today. All right, the reason why I'm bringing up the need for a superstar player, or better yet, a franchise player, is one thing that all the remaining playoff teams have in common is they got a dude in their lineup. They got a stud. They got an icon, maybe even. The Dodgers, they got Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman, along with the best catcher in baseball, Will Smith. The Padres, they roll up Manny Machado and superstar in the making, Jackson Merrill. They also do have former superstar Xander Bogaerts, and again, I'm focusing on hitting because I'll get to the reason why I'm not focusing on pitching in a second. The Mets have Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor. The Phillies have Bryce Harper. The Yankees roll out Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. The Guardians have Jose Ramirez, and I would say Steven Kwan is a superstar in the making with what he's able to do as a leadoff hitter. And the Royals, they have Bobby Witt Jr. The Tigers are really the only team where you can say, man, they don't have an absolute dude in their lineup, but even Riley Green is still a very good baseball player, and he was a 5.4 B WAR player. And the Sox need those 5 to 6 B or F WAR players in their lineup. They just don't have them right now at all. Their best hitter with a wins above replacement, the best wins above replacement was Luis Robert Jr., and he completely regressed from his superstar season in 2023. You can't consider Luis Robert Jr. a superstar player anymore. Not after you fall that far. And I get he had injuries, but he was just downright awful. And you have to face the fact. And I love Luis Robert Jr., but he had 14 home runs when he came back. Even after he came back, he barely did anything. He looked like a broken man. The injuries and the losing has just completely broken him. Thanks, White Sox. You broke a good player. But they just don't have that dude in the lineup right now. They don't have those extreme value players. The guys that you could say, I'm going to build a hitting order around that's going to score a lot of runs, because you and I can be cautiously optimistic that all this young pitching is going to bring better days. I'm very optimistic about all the young pitching that the Sox have. Even though there is the potential for injuries or underperformance to ruin it, there's just so much depth there that you got to be excited about. Hey, the Sox could have a homegrown starting rotation, especially for a franchise that hates to pay for pitching, and a homegrown bullpen where we've seen in the past, if you spend too much of your limited financial resources, you're going to end up having a lot of holes in your lineup. And the other thing is you got to score runs. And if the team can't score runs, the Sox are going to be doing a lot of losing 2-1, 3-2, 4-3. Kind of what we saw this year, because the Sox starting rotation was not the problem. It was the offense, the fielding, the base running, being overmatched, and the bullpen, which I'm going to get to later on. That was the problem. So even if you get a better bullpen, you're probably not going to improve your winning percentage if you can't score runs, if you don't have those dudes that you can build around that are going to put you in a position to win 6-2, 8-1, 7-3. That's what you need. That's a big thing that the White Sox are lacking. And if they don't get that, we're never going to see the playoffs for a long, long time. And yes, the playoffs seems like going to Mars, but that has to be the end goal of this current rebuild. The goal can't be, hey, we're just going to get back to 75 wins. Although that would be an outstanding finish in 2025 regarding this season standards. If they could, it's sad that, think about it. If they even get to 81 wins, that'll have doubled their win total from this year. Getting even to 75 wins, getting close to doubling your win total would be an amazing season. But that can't be the end goal. And think about it. The Guardians, they always have great pitching, but they were not able to weaponize it and win the division until Jose Ramirez basically showed up, and they got him out of the Dominican Republic, signed him as an international free agent at 17. And that circles back to why the Sox making all these changes to their international scouting department is so important. It's a great avenue to get high ceiling players, especially at potential low costs, but it takes a really good eye for talent, a really good ability to project, a really good organizational structure to foster that talent, to develop them into that. I mean, the Brewers, they've had great pitching, but they last won a playoff series because they had a healthy and functional NL MVP version of Christian Yelich. And the Brewers surprised everyone this year, and drink because I mentioned the Brewers, but the Brewers surprised everyone this year by hitting the ball well with young emerging stars such as Jackson Chourio, an international signing, Sal Frelick, and Bryce Terang, draft picks, and William Contreras, who they got in a 3-team deal where all they had to give up was one late-hitting all-speed prospect. That's all they had to do. The Braves paid a huge cost to basically, in essence, send William Contreras to the Brewers because they didn't have a spot for him anymore. The Rays also have had cornerstone hitters such as Evan Longoria and Randy Rosarina. And again, why am I always bringing up these 3 teams? Because if the Sox are not going to spend the money necessary to upgrade the roster and get better fast, guess what you got to do? Then operate like the Guardians, the Brewers, and the Rays, consistent winners in the small markets. And as everydayers have heard, the reason the Sox cannot duplicate what the Royals did last offseason to turn around to this season is not only because they're not going to spend the money, but because they don't have a Bobby Witt Jr. stud. Think about it. If you have a dude like Bobby Witt Jr. that you can build around, yeah, you're going to get better pretty quickly. The last time you can say that this organization produced a legit icon, a cornerstone player, especially in international free agency, was Maglio Ordonez. You could say, well, what about Jose Abreu and Luis Robert Jr.'s 2023? Those guys were men basically by the time the Sox discovered them. This wasn't like finding some, 16-year-old. This wasn't like finding Jose Ramirez. Okay? They were easy finds. But guys like Mags and Jose Ramirez, they develop because you got that eye for talent. And again, you have the organizational culture to develop these players. You make an investment. And again, that's why you need data and analytics, because the biggest thing is you need data and analytics. I had Ozzie Guillen Jr. on once, and he explained it great. You have the analytics to explain how these players are performing to them. The last player the Sox drafted to be the face of the team, I would say, was Tim Anderson, and he just didn't have staying power. Injuries and off-the-field issues, basically torpedoed that. The last stud players the Sox got in a trade was Yohan Moncada and Eloy Jimenez, and their injury history is a reason the Sox are in this mess in the first place. Otherwise, you got to go back to Paul Konerko for when the Sox really traded for a stud, because Carlos Quinton's emotions destroyed his chances of being an iconic player. And right now, I can only point to a few options where you can say the Sox might have that dude. And it isn't top-hitting prospect Colson Montgomery. He keeps giving off those Paul DeJong vibes. And I'm going to hold him more to, can you give me 20 to 25 home runs once you make it to the majors? Because I still think he'll get to the majors. And can you have an OPS above 750? But I think his inability to catch up to heat is what's going to keep him from being the next Corey Seager. I do think he's going to avoid being Miguel Vargas, though, because he can draw walks. And I want to see them foster more of that. Foster that more approach to get on base and then drive off speed over the fence. And then when it comes to velocity, well, just figure out a way to foul off those balls, or figure out a way to maybe start your bat to at least make that your contact swing, if anything. But the front office foolishly believed Vargas could be the dude. He's not. I mean, if you can't make it with the Dodgers, and especially they gave him a runway. I don't care what GM Chris Getz says. They gave him enough at-bats to get a pretty good idea that he ain't it. And if you can't make it with the Dodgers, you can't make it anywhere. I'm sorry. And I just don't even see a utility player there. Edgar Carroll, he has the makings of a stud. He had 280 and an 829 OPS between AA and AAA, 16 home runs. So obviously this is the guy that you got to hope next season gives you, becomes a stud. You want to actually have him win Rookie of the Year because you get the extra draft pick. Brian Ramos, too, there's a lot to like with his physical tools. George Wolcott is a name that I've discussed in the past. He has the potential to be just awesome, an attraction. But he needs to cut down on the strikeouts, and he's also years away from helping. Jarrell Perez, the other player, one of the other two players that the Sox got along with Miguel Vargas in that ill-fated 3-team trade deadline deal, he could be a pretty good player. I've read the reports that he's got the makeups of being a very, very fine player, but he's still years away. Samuel Zavala, he was supposed to be one of those players. He was acquired in the Dylan Cease trade, but he could barely hit at high A. If you could barely hit at high A, you got to have some serious concerns there. So with just two potential candidates to be linchpin players who do, though, come with the risk of just reaching their floor. And I think the floor for Carroll and Ramos are just going to be fine baseball players. And the Sox need more also fine baseball players too. Don't get me wrong, but they need a stud. And that is why they might have to trade ace Garrett Crochet, because you got to get more spins at having a true hitting star in the lineup. Because if you don't have the prospects to trade away for studs like Kenny Williams used to do, and you're not willing to spend the money to go bring in a gate attraction like Juan Soto or Shohei Ohtani, you got to do it through your system. And right now, with how bad you are at 121 losses, you want to give yourself as many spins at the wheel. And right now, Garrett Crochet is the only player of value that you can trade that's going to yield you the potential to get a just absolute awesome baseball player. And ultimately, what you want to end up with, because you can point, hey, the pitching's there. I feel very confident about the pitching, but what you ultimately want to end up with is a system that can produce both good pitching and hitting to build your teams and to put together your lineups and your rotation and your bullpen. And then you're using free agency and trades to put you over the top. Well, 63 players, a record 63 players suited up for the 121 loss 2024 Chicago White Sox. Let's reflect on some of the random players who got at bats next on Locked On White Sox. And this episode of Locked On White Sox is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.com, booking.yeah, with hotels, bed and breakfast, vacation rentals, resorts, and so much more on Booking.com. You might just find your perfect stay, even in your baseball rival city during the postseason. The Guardians and the Tigers are facing each other in the ALDS, and if you maybe want to take a last-minute trip to root against them, and then maybe taking the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or tour Motown, use Booking.com to book your next stay. And hey, maybe root against the Kansas City Royals and get some, Kansas City barbecue, and then check out the Negro League Museum. Booking.com can help you book a stay that's close to your teams, your home teams, or rival stadium. No matter what the team you are rooting for this postseason, Booking.com can make you a fan of any U.S. city, from hotels that look over stadiums to family-friendly resorts to cute bed and breakfast stays. Booking.com has so many choices across the U.S., and the right stay can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals. Booking.com, booking.yeah. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, follow or subscribe to the show on wherever you get your podcasts, as Locked On White Sox is available at places such as Apple and Spotify. Hey, I can be an excellent companion when you're riding the Metro into work, stuck in traffic on the Kennedy, or if you got to, do some leaf blowing, last minute leaf blowing. My leaves are starting to pile up. I think I'm going to have to do that. I like to listen to some podcasts. Obviously, I hope that you make me your first listen, but Sox Machine and CHGO White Sox are some great ones. And they're just outstanding podcasts throughout the Chicago White Sox podcast community. The Ajou. I could just go on for days. Good Guys Talk Back. Just so many. I just always ask that I'm your first listen. All right. One way to lose 121 games is to trot out 63 players, all of whom are either at or well below replacement level. And that's basically what the White Sox did this season. Now, the majority of those 63 players were pitchers. But man, did the Sox put some bad hitters in the lineup card this year. And I want to discuss some of those random guys that if you completely checked out, maybe you're suffering from the trauma of witnessing the season, or you blinked and you just missed it. And I'm talking about the guys that played in less than 20 games for whatever reason. So let's start with Duke Ellis. He got into 8 games. He played the least amount of games of any lineup player. And I talked about him on yesterday's show, but here's what I didn't cover. He got 4 at-bats early where he failed to get a hit. Did steal 4 bases in 7 games that he did enter as a pinch runner. I think he was Pedro Grifol's probably favorite player for a brief period because he just kept on putting him into every game. And granted, when you're down, you're going to try to get offense wherever you can. But it was like, I think Chris Guest's message was to bring up Duke Ellis was to send a message to guys like Zach DeLoach and Oscar Colas and even Dominic Fletcher that if you want to get back to the big leagues, you got to play better in the minors. I don't think the actual intention was, hey, let's use Duke Ellis. Because even when he got recalled, it was like, who? Who's this guy? You know, there's a lot of better players even at AA Birmingham. Why are you bringing this guy up? And on a great team like the Yankees, he has a roster spot because his speed on the base paths is amazing. I mean, I like watching, I did like watching him run. I mean, he is super fast. If you can't make it as a baseball player, you should really try to consider making it a career in the Arena League or something like that. I mean, the guy can fly. But the other interesting nugget is the odyssey he went on after being waived by the Sox. Ellis was claimed off waivers by the Mets on June 21st, and he went to their AA team, but he was only there for a few days as he was DFA'd on June 30th. The Mariners claim him on July 4th, throw him in their minors. He's there until August 23rd when he was DFA'd again, and then he got claimed by the Yankees, and that's where he's now their running specialist. He also got his first career hit in Texas, where he's from. But 3 DFAs, and somehow he falls up. Hey, God bless you, man. Nick Senzel played 10 games after being picked off the scrap heap that the Washington Nationals threw him on. He was a former top prospect for the Reds. He just never panned out. And the Sox, being obsessed with top 100 prospects of the 2017 year, they picked him up. It was obviously mostly a depth move. And at the time, I thought, hey, it can't hurt to take a look and see what he can be. The problem is the Sox just never took a look to see what he could be. I mean, I think Pedro Grifol, when he was still managing the team, forgot about him. I know Grady Sizemore forgot about him, but he barely played, and then he got cut. Yohan Moncada played just 12 games and then got hurt. Now, I know he's not random, but he just only played 12 games. And he's going to be a former White Sox player, and he's going to be one of the most disappointing players ever. And I wish him the best and hope he has a career someplace else, and that's all I want to say about him. Oscar Colas got 13 games this year. He showed he could get on base, and then he got demoted, and he's never been heard from again. He had a .368 on-base percentage for a team that struggled to get on base. You'd think maybe you might want to give him more than 13 games, but the problem is he couldn't drive the ball, and he didn't do enough in AAA to outshine Zach DeLoach to get that September call-up. But the team says they still like him, but he's 26, and they still keep him buried in the minors. At some point, you want to be like, you know what? Trade him for another team's disappointment and see if that can work out for you and see if he can work out somewhere else, because you clearly you can say all the nice things about him. I just think the actions speak louder than the words, and I think the Sox front office is completely out on him. Now, here are 2 players that I'm going to mention that are going to irk you. Rafael Ortega played in 14 games, and he got 14 at-bats and produced a 0.71, 176, 0.71 slash line. Yeah, he is the classic case of the front office going with bad veteran players early in the season, thinking somehow they could help pull the team out of a tailspin. When the moment that they reached that 3-22 mark, youth should have been served. Here's why I'm also irked. The Sox brought him up on April 26th along with Tommy Pham. And again, I love Tommy Pham. Loved his time in the White Sox. But hindsight being 2020 just shows the decision to bring up both did nothing for the franchise long-term. Why? Well, the corresponding moves to get both on the roster was to demote Dominic Fletcher and DFA Kevin Pillar. And yes, Kevin Pillar did play for the White Sox this year. And both Fletcher and Pillar, yeah, they were struggling at the time, but Fletcher showed later in the season his glove was already elite. He's going to be a very good defensive right fielder. And he showed he should have been probably given a lot longer runway. And Pham was traded in that ill-fated three-team trade where the Sox just basically threw him in. So in no way did they actually used him correctly. They wanted to bring his veteran leadership, but the thing is, he's more of a lead by example. And yes, he did do some things like talk with the guys the younger guys to show them how to prepare. But again, there wasn't a ton of young guys on the roster for a while. And they basically just threw him in because I think they thought like, hey, if he plays really well, we can get something better than the Mets got for him in 2023. And that turned out to be completely false. And then in hindsight, you stunted Dominique Fletcher's growth. You stunted maybe even Zach DeLoach's growth. And Pilar probably could have been a better veteran presence because he went on to play 83 more games where he had a 236, 291, 378 slash line. Not great, but much more productive than, say, Rafael Ortega. I mean, Rafael Ortega put up garbage numbers. And also, Pilar probably was a better clubhouse leader than Tommy Pham. Finally, Zach Remillard, who recently elected free agency. He played in 15 games and I think set the record for most times being DFA'd and accepting an assignment to Charlotte. Okay, I might be exaggerating here, but it seemed like he was DFA'd at least 3 times. And all the times he was like, fine, I'll go back to Charlotte. I'll go play there. Fine by me. Came up in early April, got sent down, then returned in mid-May, only to get demoted again in early June. And I still fully expect Zach Remillard to be a non-roster invitee in spring training. He can elect free agency and think, well, some team will give me a shot. You're basically nothing but an NRI. I'm sorry, man. That's who you are. I give you respect that you're going to have, some more years, whether it's bouncing back between AAA and in Major League Baseball. And hey, bouncing back and forth between that, living out your dream, that's a good life to have. But at some point, you're probably going to end up back with the White Sox. That's just my thinking. All right, so in terms of tracking awful numbers, SouthsideSox.com did another great job that I want to share next on Locked On White Sox. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And FanDuel is amazing for parlays, props, and futures. The traditional spreads, over, under, and money lines are also great on FanDuel, but it is the parlays, props, and futures that make using America's #1 sportsbook so much fun. Tonight, FanDuel has a parlay at plus 1094, where if the Phillies hit the money line, along with Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, and Alec Baum, all getting two plus total bases, you can turn, say, $10 into $109.45. Americans, we don't like ties, but FanDuel has it at plus 290 for the Bears and Jaguars ending the first quarter in a tie. You could put $10 on that, and if it hits, you can nearly triple your money if it hits. And any team beating the Brewers in the playoffs has gone on to the World Series. The Mets are at plus 420 to win the National League pennant. $10 there, and if it hits, you can win $42. That's FanDuel.com. And the Chicago Blackhawks start their regular season tonight. Too bad it is on the road, and us Hawks fans have to wait until mid-October for the first Blackhawks home game. But that gives you plenty of time to use the Game Time app to find a great seat to see Connor Bedard at the best price possible. Also, Bulls preseason is starting off, and soon the regular season will be in full swing, and you should use the Game Time app for your ticket needs. The lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And always be on the lookout for amazing deals on great events. For example, they had 50% off tickets for the Dodgers and Diamondbacks on Labor Day. Hey, a great matchup at 50% off. That was a great value. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all my everydayers for sticking with me this long through the show. Always appreciate you. We're growing the YouTube community. I believe we're at 1,935 subscribers. Hey, tell your friend, tell your friends, tell your family, subscribe, especially if they were White Sox fans at one point. Say, hey, at some point, this team is going to sell. There's, I would say, I'm going to handicap it at a 95% chance that they will stay in Chicago. I have a feeling an owner is going to say, look, I can share this market with Chicago. Maybe I'm being Pollyannish, but I have a feeling somebody's going to say, you know what, I can make a lot of money staying in Chicago than say going to Nashville. I'm going to build the ballpark. I'm going to fix all these issues with Chicago Sports Network because there's money there and we're going to thrive. So tell them, hey, you can still check in every now and again for an update, subscribe. And also, again, if you need to, if you're sitting on the Metro, driving into work, traveling into work, commuting, or you got to blow some leaves, make sure to subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts, as we're available at places such as Apple and Spotify. All right, you and I know the season was terrible and the numbers support it. SouthsideSox.com editor Brett Ballantini, he's been on the show a couple times to discuss it in detail in terms of those numbers. But contributor Mark Liptak recently had a piece on some eye-popping stats where it's like you look at it and you'd be like, can't possibly be that bad. Oh, wait, whoa. It really is that bad. And it helps explain, these two nuggets support, again, another reason on the Dead Seaside Scroll list of reasons why the Sox ended up worse than the 1962 Mets. All right, so the Sox won. This is what Liptek found. The Sox won just 2 games after trailing in the 7th inning or later, and technically one of those being down came in extra innings. April 27th versus Tampa Bay, the Sox actually did end up getting down a run from the Manfred runner, and in the bottom of the 10th, the Sox scored 2 more runs to win 8-7. Then September 24th, the series where the fans were very upset that how dare the Sox win a series at home when they could have set the all-time losses mark in front of owner Jerry Reinsdorf. And, everybody was chanting sell the team, which was awesome. And that should be the new booing, is sell the team. They came back to beat the Angels 3-2 by scoring 3 runs in the 8th. Think about that. The lack of being able to come back is again a big reason why the Sox only won 41 games. If you are able to rally back even, 2 more times, you're not the worst team of all time. Think about those margins there. All right, then he has some great detail about how bad the bullpen was at blowing leads, and here's what Lipkit writes. On the other side of the coin, the bullpen was hideous, a complete dumpster fire. 27 times the Sox took a lead into the 7th inning or later and lost the game. 12 times they lost the lead in the 7th inning, 9 times they lost the lead in the 8th inning, 3 times they lost the lead in the 9th inning, and 3 times they lost the lead in the 10th inning. And then he gives a breakdown of all those games and the pitchers that ended up blowing the lead. And he did give like a half if like it was a 2-person bullpen collapse. But Michael Kopech led the way with 4. Jordan Leisure, 3.5. John Brebbia with 3. And Justin Anderson and Dominic Leone with 2.5. And I swear it was more for Brebbia and Anderson. I have a feeling, though, I just kept saying, like, hey, those guys are not going to fit. They definitely fail at keeping the game tied. I know that a lot, but that's a lot of blown leads. Again, if the bullpen even protects even 10 of those leads, you're nowhere near 1962 New York Mets level bad. You're just not. So those are, again, 2 just eye-popping stats that support, again, why did the Sox finish with 121 losses? All right, well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB, as host Sully is going to discuss the Fall Classic, and he's got covered every single day. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And I'll be back tomorrow with the discussion with SoxOn35ths.com, Noah Phelan. We're going to discuss why watching division rivals in the playoffs is actually boring. Also, feel free to leave comments about today's topics regarding the Sox need for a superstar in the lineup to get things turned around, the random players the Sox had in the lineup this year, and another eye-popping stats to show just how bad the Sox were this year. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at Todd J. Dub or at Locked On Sox, or you can email me at LockedOnWhiteSox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.